ASLers, go tell your wife you're going to be 30 to 45 minutes late to dinner. Friday night, you're going to have to skip the movie. You got a starter kit game coming on board. Starter kit 4, continuing with starter kit 4. Hopefully we'll finish it sooner than later. 3 infantry scenarios that we've done, I believe, so far. Here's the 4th one. This one is actually an interesting one, simply because it is a rehash of an ASL scenario called The End of Their Strength, I believe. I actually did a game replay on this one, and you can check out that game or any other game, any other after-action report on that particular scenario, and you can see the extreme similarities. This map's pretty nice. The other map used in ASL, extremely similar, probably with some more kunai, but it is pretty good, to be honest with you. It's a fun scenario. You've got the Americans coming into a village, clearing the village out for the most part of Japanese units, and then having the Japanese have a reinforcement group just as the Americans should be clearing out the village. And you've got a short 6-turn scenario. I think the end of their strength was 7, if I recollect. And the size of the map is about the same, to be honest with you. Maybe it took the Japanese longer to get involved, probably a turn or so of CXing to get on the board to enter the fray. So, 1 turn of movement, subtract the turn of movement and put them closer. That's pretty much what this one does. So let's go ahead and take a look at the VC. We've got, again, Americans win a game end by controlling more buildings on board O than the Japanese. Now, let's, when you deal with PTO, when you talk about buildings, you need to make sure what you're dealing with, and you need to make sure that when some huts are destroyed, I'm not sure if they can be destroyed in this one, that you have the definition of building. Sometimes it changes, sometimes it doesn't. But we can go over those rules real quick as soon as we pop through the scenario card. So again, 2 half boards, don't really care about the balances, short 6 turns. Again, Japanese sets up first, Japanese defender. But in this case, we're going to see something different. Let's scroll it down a little bit. So again, 6 turns, reinforcements on turn 3. You've got a weak force in the village, 4.5, 5 squad equivalents, 2 137s. Notice the 137s. I want you to take a look and pay attention to the 137s. These guys right here. Say, Stu, I see what the 137 is. Who cares? They suck. They got no firepower, and they're kind of pointless. Yeah, you're kind of right. But notice with the VCR, Americans win game end by controlling more buildings on board O than the Japanese. So as we progress through the scenario card, you want to ask yourself, why are there 137s in this game where I've never seen a 137 before in my entire gaming career? We're going to go over that. These little bastards right here can prove a very helpful role for the Japanese. So the turn 3 reinforcements, a hefty group. We've got 6 447s, a couple 237s, pretty much just your mortar guy and maybe a scout, something like that. 228, of course, goes with a medium machine gun. 10-0, very powerful leader, high morale. He's going to give everyone else that easy morale boost as the Japanese do. 8-0 leader, very functional, very useful. The 8-0 in this case can be used for the mortar guy. Maybe both half squads go with the mortar. I don't know, however you want to play it. And therefore, he can get those units up and moving and move the mortar fast. 4 portage points. I see lots of guys dropping mortars because they don't like to move them. You guys got to pull them with you, especially those high rate of fire mortars. These Japanese mortars are extremely strong in the game. You need to flip the counter over, go to the quote chapter H notes in the SK rulebook, and you need to read these things and you need to fear them. Because if your opponent knows how to use them, you will likely lose the game. It's as straight up as that. So I don't really care about the medium machine guns. Breakdown 11, those things usually break like 3 times during the game. Don't really care. But they are manned usually by the 228s. And if you put a leader with them, essentially they become a 229. That is about the only strength they have behind them. Luckily, they do have a breakdown of 11. So a 9 morale unit firing an medium machine gun or a heavy machine gun or a pair of mediums for 2 crews, a general 2 crew setup that you see in many games. Kawaguchi's Gamble is one of them. Usually both crews will be handling and portaging those medium machine guns around the map. All right, let's take a look at the Americans. Now, the Americans will differ from the other Americans we have experienced so far during our SK travels. These are Merrill's Marauders. You look at the ELR and they're elite units, badasses, 6.67s assault fire, 3 smoke, a couple 3.47s that's going to handle the mortar, perhaps even the medium, or just be a scout. 10-2, badass. 9-1, I love 9-1s practically over every single leader in the game, simply because he breaks far less than many other troops. 10-2 leaders aren't that common, so I really don't compare them to the 10-2s. 9-2 leaders have a tendency to draw lots of firepower and get whacked that way. 9-1s are the unsung heroes, I believe. The 8-0s are always a good fit, and gotta love the counters. You know, I love the American, that little American figure, all way back to squad leader. So, typical array. We got a medium. We got some mortars. Nothing to see here. But again, you've got to read the entire scenario card, people. Special Rules defines this scenario as it did the end of their strength. Okay? PTO terrain is in effect, including light jungle. This is the first scenario that we've had light jungle only. No dense jungle in this one, so all terrain that looks like a tree is going to be a +1, and you have line of sight along the edges in the white areas, the green areas through there. So a +1 rain dice roll modifier applies to all 2-hit and non-ordnance, non-residual firepower infantry dice rolls. That's a mouthful. So +1 dice roll modifier applies to all 2-hit. What's that mean? Mortars. Mortars will be +1 to hit. Non-ordnance, non-residual firepower infantry dice rolls. When your squad's prep or first fire, they will have a +1 dice roll modifier. And any residual will not have that modifier. And then you continue to read, definitely. This dice roll modifier, because it's a +1, does not negate FFMO or interdiction. So you can interdict normally. You say, oh, he's got a +1 modifier. Don't give a shit. Scenario Special 1 says you are still going to be interdicted and you still forfeit that movement in the open if you get caught. Or affect placement of residual fire counters. So therefore, it will not reduce the firepower strength of any residual firepower counters. And the ensuing attack on the infantry dice roll because it's a residual, whereas the rule in the previous sentence says non-residual. All right, smoke and white phosphorus is non-applicable. This is a big one. Wow. That right there is a big one. Probably because of the rain. Usually the smoke doesn't work in the rain so much. The rain knocks it down. So, what does that mean for the Japanese OB? Let's cruise up here. What does that mean for the Japanese OB? These are simply two firepower mortars, rate of fire 2. No white phosphorus, no smoke. All right, keep that in mind. That's a big one. And unfortunately, it's just kind of tagged on the end. A little, I mean, literally, this is freaking three words, you know. So be careful of that. Keep that in mind. Write a note on the side. All right, another one, another big one. American units may not use double time when you're dealing with jungle movement or seeking units out or chasing them down. You're going to chase them much slower. In close combat, the American units are automatically considered CX for all purposes, including ambush. So do you think you might want to engage in close combat with the Americans, with the Japanese, who are mostly first line, instead of this second line monkey right here? I'm not sure why they're second line guys, but they're pretty bad. But all these other guys are first lines. So these guys right here are way exhausted. And we'll get into that in a second. As the first action, this is the big one here. This is the flavor SSR. And I wish more designers would create flavor SSRs like this. I think the SK4 does a decent exhibition of these types of flavorful SSRs. Of course, this is from this ASL scenario, but Kawaguchi's Gamble, it's got a couple wonky scenarios, special rules, etc., etc. So as the first action in the rally phase of each American player turn, the American 10-2 leader or its replacement must, if in good order, take a 1 pin task check. The only possible result is failed that the leaders pinned that player turn. Okay, see, why would they have that? That's kind of stupid. Well, this is when you need to do your reading. This is when you read the game and you read the description up here. It describes that the, I think it's, either Merrill himself, I don't quite recall what it is, but the American 10-2 leader was literally like, had the flu or something like that. And so therefore, he's just like vomiting every 2 or 3 minutes. So, and they were exhausted. And it says right here, Colonel McGee lost consciousness himself 3 times due to their exhaustion and fever. So they're pretty much in an exhausted state, which Scenario Special Rule 2 also reflects. Scenario Special Rule 3 reflects the state of the leader. These guys no CX, nor CX from these guys because they're all exhausted from all the fighting or just the weather or just bad things. So Americans don't have the advantage in close combat because most likely they'll get ambushed. And when they get ambushed, the 4 firepower or 3 firepower Japanese units, even the 1 firepower, 1 to 6, is not a bad roll when you're hand-to-hand combat with the -2 because they are considered CX for all purposes, which includes the -1 in close combat. So you get ambushed, CX, and Japanese -1 die roll modifier, you're -3. If you're at the 1 to 6 column, that one of those 137s jumps on you and you're at 1 to 6, he needs a 7 for a casualty reduction in close combat if he uses hand-to-hand. 7, 1 to 6, and he needs a 7. You don't want that. You just don't. That's all there is to it. So let's go to the map and let's describe something that we might anticipate seeing in this particular scenario. Note, few units, decent units, strong leader, weak-ass leader. So what do you think the weak-ass leader is going to do? Quite possible. Let's take a look at the map to see if you are right. Here's the map that we have. 2 half boards. Lots of terrain. Look at this giant jungle over here. Giant jungle on the left-hand side. Remember, it is a light jungle, +1 TEM, which means the Americans are going to shred you. And I'm going to change this counter out, actually, real quick. All right, so I changed those counters out. We'll explain those counters in just a moment that you see right in the middle. So here's your setup area. The Americans set up pretty much on this board on the bottom. Yes, it's a full half board, but the Americans are not going to set up on this part of the board. I simply just cut that part off, stuck them up further. Don't need to bother with that. Here are some notes I write on the board. +1 rain dice roll modifier to hit infantry fire table dice roll, no effect on residual. These are notes that I write myself, so I don't have to keep them on the side, and I see them all day on the map. Same thing with here. American CX and CC, including ambush. 10-2 rally phase, 1 PTC equals pinned. And then I just put the +1 rain up here. So whilst you leave the bottom board and enter this board, it's still kind of in your eyesight, and it's semi non-intrusive here. If you put it in the jungle, you can't read it. So I threw it right here. So the American plan is pretty simple. It's control for the number of buildings in here. Huts are considered buildings, and I believe huts are considered buildings even when they are destroyed. I don't think there's any other way to destroy them other than driving AFVs over them in SK. But in ASL, they have some other value and ways to destroy them. Let me double check the rules in the SK destruction of huts. So I popped my SK4 rules out, which you should have as well, downloaded from the MMP site to get the theoretically most up-to-date rules. Again, I always like to reiterate, if you have SK1 and then you bought SK4, literally throw away your SK1 rules, throw away your SK2 rules, and even throw away your SK3 rules. But keep the vehicle notes. That's important to have. Those are not rules, those are vehicle notes. Throw those rule sets away. You won't need them. Use this 2020 version by Multiman Publishing right here. Use this version here, 2020. It's on the bottom. And highlight it as it goes. All right. Huts right here. Huts a +1 hindrance, like an out-of-season orchard, but only if the LOS crosses a building depiction. So it has to cross the depiction. +1 TEM, which is great. So it's like an orchard, but it's +1 TEM as well. There's no backblast penalty from firing from a hut. That makes them wonderful. AFVs destroy huts real easily. We're not going to bother with that. Any KIA in a hut versus a unit, any KIA result versus a unit in a hut immediately collapses the hut. I'm going to underline that. Underline that stuff. That's important to note. That's a one-liner. Okay, so if we get a KIA from the Americans, just massive firepower, then it's going to be bad news, especially with a -2 leader. So if the hut collapses, place a collapsed hut in the hut hex. A collapsed hut has 0 TEM and is a normal LOS hindrance, not a 1 level. Across the building depictions. So you're going to put this counter on the hex, and it's going to obscure your view of the building depictions. So note that when you're tracing LOS, don't just say, oh, it's inherent now. Make it cross the depictions. But it's not considered a 1 level hindrance, only the same level. So if you're firing from a level 1 hill across the hut, if it's not collapsed, it will be a hindrance. If it is collapsed, it will not be a hindrance. I don't really care about the movement factor. Well, the LOS hindrance still costs 2 MF to and is this is a big one, is considered a hut building for victory condition purposes in ASL, and there's no rubble in SK, but in ASL, usually most buildings that are rubbled lose their building status. But this is only for victory conditions purposes only. Okay? So you're not a building for rally purposes. You're not a building for routing purposes as well. So you don't have to route to a collapsed hut because it's not considered a building, because those are based on routing rules. Same thing with rally. They're based on rally bonuses. Doesn't matter, but it is considered a hut or a building for victory conditions. And guess what? Our victory conditions dictate control of hut hexes, or building hexes is what they dictate. They don't even talk about huts. So infantry unit in the hut at the moment it collapses, must take a PTC. Well, in this particular scenario, any KIA result will collapse the hut. So if we actually get a KIA result, to be honest with you, this part's not even going to apply because everyone's going to be broken. if you get a KA, I guess, yeah, I guess, maybe the Japanese break and just step reduce. Oh, interesting. Yeah, it probably does work. But everyone in there is considered to have a morale level of 8. That's why I highlighted in red. It's not whatever morale they are, even if it's 9. You know, morale level of 8 of the PTC only. So if you're 10 morale at 10-0 we saw earlier, morale level 8, because that's what the rules say. Every unit, not just squads, not broken units, not Americans, not conscripts, every unit. Failed PTC pins that unit even if it is normally immune to pin results. So we do have that in SK. So that would be, I think the Japanese leaders are immune to pin. So if a Japanese leader's in there and you run your tank into that location and he fails the 8 PTC check level, the normal at base level morale 8, then he will be pinned. And we don't care about pass. And that's about it. So download it, highlight it. Okay, highlight important sections, one-liners, things like that. It'll be easy to find and make sure you update it later. That's as simple as that. So we're going to save those changes there. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 buildings. So the victory conditions are what? The majority of buildings. So the Americans only need 5. So look, guess what? Those look pretty clean to get. That's legit only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hexes in from the board. They're legit. Assault move, advance phase, assault move, advance phase, assault move, advance phase. They make it there by turn 3, and that's when the Japanese reinforcements come on. So the Americans will essentially have their victory conditions before, you know, the massive amount of units come on. These are just concealments. So what I was telling you about in terms of, notice the cheap weak 8-0 here. Actually, you can't see them. The 8-0 here, pretty weak compared to the 10-0. Doesn't have a -1 modifier, anything like that. So what do you think he might be useful for the Japanese OB? This guy's going to be just a badass, hopefully rallying units, things like that. But we do have an array of units. A couple 237s. So when we come on, let's say the Americans obtain these positions here. Well, I'm not actually going to move them because you probably don't want to do that. So the Americans, let's say, have this position, maybe a guy here, not here, probably a guy here, probably a guy here, or a guy here that's a check mark. Putting pressure on here, they might actually have this one here. But what do you see on this map? As it gets smudged right there. You see lots of, everything has a hindrance. These Japanese units can all come on the board, covered in hindrances, +1 light woods, or not, well, essentially jungle, but it's very difficult to move through. All that's 2 movement factors, but the Japanese can CX. We can move on this side over here, come through the kunai, and remember, these do not block line of sight. You can see right through them to your target hex. So how do you think that's useful in here? Well, if you had a number of units, 3 or so squads arrayed in various ways, and we're going to go over that during the game. I'm going to show you how to set up your units to make sure you don't get annihilated. So if we have an American unit over this location, right? And we've reached here at the end of turn 1, turn 2, what can we do? Yeah, we can simply Banzai that unit as long as there aren't too many other Americans around. And then we'll move towards the unit. And then we can enter his location. He can actually bypass it. This guy can go here. This guy can go here. Next impulse, he can go here. He can go here if he wants to. He can go here. You can just kind of like run around. But, and then, or you can continue to jump in there. And that will get you there pretty quickly. Directly into the American's hex and contest for control. So that's what we hope to look for. Hopefully the Japanese can take advantage of a Banzai charge with that 8-0 leader, because I think if they go head-to-head with the Americans, they will lose, simply because the American firepower will be able to counteract that +1 rain dice roll modifier pretty easily. And remember, the +1 dice roll modifier also helps us when we're Banzaiing. If this unit were here to fire on this 447 here, if we move here and he fires on him, +1, +2, +3 for the rain. He's in stone building. That's a +2. That's a +1. He enters his hex. Final protective fire, triple point blank. That's a +2. One for the hut, one for the rain. It doesn't say it's at range of 1 or greater. It just says +1 to dice roll modifiers on the IFT, non-ordnance, non-residual. So remember the +1, and that's why we have the big reminder. Okay. What these denote, and pretty much that's it for the Japanese. This is a very straightforward scenario. Americans come in, bust face. The Japanese really don't have a force to really defend against these many Americans. If you set up, and the Japanese have to set up, I think, within 4 hexes of AA5. It's on the scenario card. You could read it. I'm not sure. It's one of those types of things, probably AA4. Regardless, the Americans will simply come down, pound, take what he needs to take, hopefully get as much as possible, perhaps even going there if he has a really good run of things. And then the Japanese will counterattack with these units here, fighting for the huts, of course, right? They're going to be fighting for the huts. So, what are these counters over here? What's this guy? I've never seen that counter before, Stu. Okay, these, unlike the ones we had in the first game, because I've developed these with some help from Root and Putin, instead of turning your unit sideways like this, any unit on one of these counters is considered hidden. So when you're dealing with solo play, it's easier to keep track of hidden units with these things on them like that. Or some other device. You know, I had a Chinese concealment counter on them. You can do that. Or any other means of identifying them. This is much more colorful. It's brighter. You can see exactly where they are. And why do I have hidden units there? Well, one here is simply to take advantage of this open ground and just get a 2-2 shot, or 2-1 in the case may be, because of the rain, on some hapless units. Break them maybe, and then subsequent first fire, final protective fire, the whole 9 yards. And then when he breaks, because the final protective fire, then he can actually route back, hopefully. He'll probably get annihilated, but I just want to break a couple units. Is that the best place for him? No, it's not. It really isn't. His spot is probably better off at a flank over here, but I really don't want to put him in a hut. It's just, I mean, you could, in case the Americans just want to advance in the hut, then you get him in close combat. That's something you can consider. But again, with the American half squads that he's got, he's probably going to send them forward running into huts. 9-0 and a 137. Stu, why do you have the 9-0 with the 137? Again, by assault move in advanced phase with the Americans coming on, they're going to reach this position by turn 3-ish. Hopefully. I mean, that's the plan for the Americans. So the 9-0 leader is simply used for mobility. Hopefully this unit can remain hidden for quite some time in the game. And at the end game, we can go 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, and then jump into either one of these locations here for hopefully an end game victory. Now remember, looking back at your scenario card, let's take a gander at it. What do you see that makes a difference for that unit to be hidden and possibly steal a building later in the game. What do you see? American moves first. So who would move second? Japanese unit. Move second in the game. So therefore, if you come out of hidden status in your turn 6, the Americans cannot move to contradict you. Now, he may shoot the living crap out of you, but you have a move and an advance for free to possibly retake one of those buildings. Or if you can move through both of them, then you get both of them. So for all intents and purposes, until he finds the hidden units, which he may have to spend time doing, that you're going to steal one back from him. Of course, knowing that you set up within 4 hexes of AA5, he knows the limitations of your hip units. And Stu, I don't recall seeing anything about hip units in the rules. Where the hell are they? Not here, not here, not here, not in the OB. Where would you find them? You would find them in the rules. Here we are. In the rules, something we all need to be familiar with. Going back to the leaders and the huts, look what we have here. Japanese leader can pin only due to entering bamboo, which would occur when? Entering bamboo at what part of the turn? Movement phase. So you will pin during the movement phase. Or via a collapsing hut. Collapsing hut can occur in 2 methods. How will that occur? During a fire phase, where someone shoots at you and generates a KIA, or when a vehicle, friendly or otherwise, goes through that location and it will collapse that automatically. But otherwise does not take PTCs. Although a PTC result removes concealment or hip. So you do not take pin task checks for leaders. Their abilities always apply to their units unless they're pinned. And here is something that we need to look at, that we're solving our question that we had in the beginning. In addition to hip guns, the Japanese player may always use hip for up to 10% fractions rounded up of squad equivalents in his squad equivalents, not half squad, squad, in his OB setup, and any single man counters, which the 9-0 is a single man counter, in any terrain except open ground. Hip is lost as if the hip infantry were a gun. You can read those rules at your leisure. So, let's go back to the map. Here we are on the map. 9-0 leader on the left-hand side. Hip, half squad, half squad. 2 half squads equals a squad equivalent. All right, click, 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 click. Enjoy the clicks. Squad equivalent, I could split them both up. That's probably why you have 137s, because these will do no other help to you. Also, when the Americans are moving up, if the 137 can engage them in close combat, jump them during his turn, the advance phase, he might get a free kill. Note, however, these are second line units and do not get the -1 dice roll modifier for ambush for being Japanese. First line and elites only, which would be elite would be a leader, and first line are your 447s that we have in this game. And again, hidden unit here, the basic concept is 2, 4, 6 and advance. He regains 2 at the end of the game. All right. And as the American player, you have to be aware of that, when, especially if you see a 137 pop up from hidden status. Then you know the other one, if he has it listed, is another 137. And it's probably not going to be used for offensive capabilities. So, things to consider in your game. I'll run through this one. It should run pretty quick, should be pretty smooth. It's all going to be fighting over these little buildings. And hopefully we can get an effective Banzai charge or two off so we can engage in close combat. Remember, the Americans are CX'd -1 due to the CX status. We'll give the Japanese a -2 if they're first line Japanese in close combat. That's essentially having a -2 leader attacking with you. Nothing to spit at. All right, guys. Go to dinner with your wife. Go see that movie. We're done here. Let's go play some ASL.